Hey everyone, this is Gary House, and today I'm going to be making a Dublin Coddle in my Dutch oven. And I'm making potato cheddar beer bread in my Camp Chef stove, all on the Cooking Everything Outdoors show for St. Patty's Day, of course. The Outdoor Cook, Cooking Everything Outdoors show. I hope you try this at home. So let's go over the ingredients we're going to need for our Dublin Coddle. I have here about 8 lengths of really nice pork sausage, some potatoes, 4, 6 depending on the size of them, 1 large onion, 1 pound of thick cut bacon, I have 4 cloves of garlic. Traditionally just a couple, but I like a lot of garlic. And I have a bouquet garni of just thyme and flat leaf parsley. So add some extra flavor into that. You'll need a little coarse ground pepper, but really no salt. Plenty of salt in the bacon. So let's get this in the Dutch oven. So I'm using my Camp Chef 3-burner big gas grill, and I'm also using a 12-inch Camp Chef Dutch oven. And this is the 20-year anniversary edition that I use a lot. While our pot is preheating, let's do some prep work real quick. Now, this is 1 pound of thick sliced bacon, and I want to leave it fairly rustic. Now, you have to remember that this whole recipe, it was just a poor farmer's recipe, a poor man's recipe. Basically, the housewife would put it on in the afternoon. It would cook for hours on the stove until the husband came back from the pub. And it was quite often eaten late at night. Very wholesome, very savory meal. So we want to keep it as rustic as possible. So fairly well chunked bacon. We're going to leave our sausage whole in the casing like this. No need to cut that up. On our onion, we want a fairly rough slice on this. Let me get this. I'm bungling this right now. All right, let's cut our onion up. Get it peeled. I'm going to go for a fairly heavy dice, if you will. Just take my chef knife and I'm going to go right in the middle. I'm just going to come across, not all the way through, and then some large cuts like that, and then some more chunks. And you can see it's a fairly decent sized dice. You can also do this as a slice, if you will. Leave them in large chunks, however you want. It's a rustic dish. Do the same thing on this one. You'll notice I left the end piece on there. That helps you do this fast dicing, if you will. Holds the onion together while we prepare it. And there we are. So, our garlic, we're going to throw that in pretty early. I'm just going to give it a whack, cut the end off, gut it, like that. We'll just take it and do some coarse cuts. And that's our garlic. So the first thing we're going to get going is our bacon in our hot pot. I didn't put any oil in there. There's going to be plenty of grease from this bacon to help season this up. We'll get that going in there. Give it a good mix. I have absolutely no idea if pre-cooking the bacon is part of the original traditional recipe, but frankly I can't stand not to smell the cooked bacon, and I think it adds some additional smoky flavor. So we are going to cook the bacon probably, you know, third to halfway through. And I'm also going to add the sausage here once I get a little bit of extra fat in there. And we want to be very careful that we're not breaking up our sausage either. Okay, it's cooking up nicely. Let's get our sausage in there. And just get the whole links in there. Now this is 8 links. You may not want that much. You could put 6 in there or less. I'm going to make a fairly hearty dish here. So our sausage and bacon is cooked. The bacon's, you know, roughly a third of the way done. I want to add my onions now. That'll help tenderize them up, get a little of that pig flavor that we so crave. Again, give that a good stir. Now, if one of your sausages explodes or breaks up, no big deal. It's just going to add to the flavor. It's really more of a presentation thing than anything. So while this is cooking up, let's prep our potatoes. Now, these are just regular, you know, Idaho potatoes. There are a couple schools of thought. Most of the recipes that I found actually peeled these and then sliced them up thinly or thickly. You know, to me this is a rustic dish, and you know, peeling is, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, work. So I'm leaving mine on. It's entirely optional for you, but we just want coarse chunks in this recipe. And that's what I'm looking for. These will cook in that pot for a good hour and a half. The smaller you make your pieces, the quicker it will cook. But it won't have, I think, as much of that hearty flavor that you might be looking for. If you find any flaws in there, give them to the dog. Now I'm going to put my garlic in here when I add my potatoes, which by the look of things is right about now. I've got some color on my bacon, got some color on my sausage. The onions are softening up a little bit. So let's add these goodies in there. Ha! Lost a couple off the backside, was able to save it. You want some? There you go. My little scavenger. So let's give this a good mix. Now you also notice that I didn't take out any of the grease. I'm going to leave that in there. There's really not a lot, and it's going to add some flavor in there. Now it's time to take my bouquet garni, which is just some thyme sprigs and some parsley. I'm going to work that right in the center here. It's just going to add a bunch of additional flavor. And what I forgot to tell you about was that we're going to use apple cider. You could use chicken stock or just regular water. You know, in the old days, water was pretty much what they were used a lot, but I'm thinking apple cider is going to add a real nice sweet kick to it. So we want to get in there and give this a good coating. Okay, so that everything's covered. Now, this cannot boil. It's not a boiling recipe. We want it to simmer. So we're going to bring this up to temp, and I'm going to simmer it at least for an hour, perhaps an hour and a half. While we're doing that, I'm going to make you a killer beer bread recipe. So my Dublin Coddle is now up to temp, and it's starting to simmer. So I'm going to add my final ingredient, which is coarse ground black pepper. Still no salt in this. And just give a good healthy coating. Coating, is that proper? No. Just give it some bloody pepper. Now for the bread. So let's go over our ingredients for our potato cheese beer bread. Now it's a simple basic beer bread recipe where I have 3 cups of self-rising flour, 3 tablespoons of sugar, but I added 2 teaspoons of salt. Because we're using potatoes, I want a little bit more saltiness added to this. A heaping cup or so, probably a cup and a half of diced green onions. There's about 6 stalks in there. And about 1.5 cups of, this is a Colby Jack cheddar cheese. You could use regular sharp cheddar cheese. I'd add more bite to it. And a couple leftover baking potatoes, because this is going to be the secret ingredient for our beer bread. And because it's an Irish recipe, you got to have potatoes, right? So before we get started making our beer bread, we want to preheat our Camp Chef grill box. Now I've taken the grate, and I've taken 1 grate out, and I set 1 grate on the bottom of my grill box, and you've seen me do this before. So I just want to get this preheated now. And I usually set my dials, both my dials, on medium. That's going to give me about the 350 degrees that I'm looking for. It's only going to take a few minutes to preheat this. Let's start putting this together now. So we need to prep our potatoes. Leftover baked potatoes are absolutely perfect. You know, we always tend to cook a little bit too many, especially when we're camping. I don't know about you, but I always have extra potatoes. And this is really great for for the beer bread. Now, if you don't have any leftover baked potatoes, just take a couple nice sized potatoes and put them in the microwave for, what is it, 10 minutes or so, and you can get a pretty fair rendition of a baked potato. I want these really chunky. I'm leaving the skin on, you know me. Peeling potatoes is work. So basically I've quartered it lengthwise and just cubing up some potato there. That's exactly what I want. I want some nice big chunks in this bread. So a couple medium-sized potatoes seem to work best for me. If you want a monstrous amount of potato, then go with a large russet. You could add red potatoes to this, Yukon Golds. I'm just trying to tell you, I don't really care what you do. Just get potato in there. I would even think a sweet potato would be pretty decent fare. Okay. So potatoes are kind of blah without salt, so I'm going to add a little bit more salt. This is just kosher salt. Pretty healthy coating on there. Just get that mixed up. I'm going to do that before I add it to the flour, so I have some salt biting on that potato. Now, let's get all this mixed together. So we have our regular mixture, and just want to give this a good mix. Try to get as much as possible outside the bowl. It makes very dramatic presentation. Okay, let's add our potatoes in there. Add our green onions and our cheese. Let's get this all mixed up so everything's coated. Okay, nice and gentle. I get a lot of questions about what type of beer to use, and I got to tell you right off the bat, just use cheap beer. You don't use anything fancy. I have some more recipes that I'm going to share with you down the road further with some nicer beers, some darker beers and such. But I just use, you know, Pabst, Milwaukee is really good. Coors would be good. I don't go for the light versions, and I don't like hoppy versions. That's just my personal taste, but get some cheap beer. Now, I've also had questions about whether you could use non-alcoholic beer. Absolutely. I actually made a huge mistake personally, and I bought a 12-pack of Old Milwaukee. I did not notice that it was the NA version, the non-alcoholic or near beer. And well, you know, I got it home, I opened it up, and I started cooking with it, and then I realized what I had. So if anybody wants some, I got a 12-pack in there right now. And it just works just fine. We don't need alcohol to make our beer bread. We need yeast and hops and all the good stuff that comes in it. So this recipe takes about 1 can of beer. Give that a good mix. And this should come out to be a really wet version. We may need a little more beer if it doesn't get wet on you. That didn't sound right, did it? Okay, it's looking pretty good. Now, because of the chunks in the potatoes, it's even a looser dough than normal. So again, I will use a pie pan to help it hold all together. Otherwise, you could just dump it in your Dutch oven and let it spread out. But I like more of a hearty loaf, if you will. So let's get this greased up, and let's get this beer bread in there. And there's going to be a little bit of flour on the top. So I'm going to take some of this leftover that didn't get mixed up, and it's going to give me a little bit of a cakey top, and I kind of like that. So let's get the rest of this on there. And you can take and really form it into your cake pan as you will. So we got our grill box down to about 350. I have my single grate set down in the bottom of the grill box. Beer bread goes in right on top of that grate. Okay, I'm pretty sure our beer bread is done now. It can be tricky on this particular one with the potatoes in it to test for doneness. So all I did was take a toothpick and tried to find the doughy parts, put it in there, and it came out dry. If you put it in there and you hit a potato part, it'll come out a little wet. So I've already checked this out, and let's get a peek at it. Look at that. So very carefully with a good pair of gloves, let's take it out and loosen it up. Maybe just give it some good wax there. And it should roll right out. That looks beautiful. And very carefully flip that over to cool off. Ha. It's hot and it's sticking to my towel. Okay, the potato beer bread cooked for a solid 45 minutes. I've had our Dublin Coddle on for an hour and a half, maybe hour 40 minutes. So it's all ready to go. Let's give this a slice and see how we did here. Still a little hot, but I think you'll like what you see there. Nice crust on that on the bottom. Beautiful chunks of potato in there. The cheese laced in with the green onion. Absolutely delicious. Oh, mighty, mighty. All right. A little warm. Let's bring this over. The first thing I want to do is get my bouquet of herbs out of there. I love cooking outdoors. And let's ladle some of this up. Got our delicious broth. Big chunks of potatoes. Our sausage, our bacon. Onion. Just absolutely delicious. And the fragrance that's coming from this is just incredible. Take a little bit of fresh parsley and sprinkle it over the top, and you have yourselves one heck of a meal. I hope you give this a try. Make sure that you stop by and visit my sponsors, Camp Chef at OutdoorCooking.com and IslandGrillstone.com, because as you know, none of this would happen without them. Also want you to come and visit me on YouTube, on iTunes, on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and wherever else I might show up. Hey, this is Gary House, Cooking Everything Outdoors show. We made potato beer bread, Dublin Coddle, and it's good. Wow. You got to make this.